I'm super, super excited to be able to do this webinar with you all today. Breastfeeding and the topic of breastfeeding is something that I've always had an interest in, specifically because of my specific breastfeeding experience. And so to be able to share the information that I've learned through research as well as my personal experience, I think is such an honor to be able to share that with you guys. Before I continue with this, I want to make a disclosure. I am not a lactation consultant. I will try my best to answer any questions that you might have. But throughout the course of this webinar, you're definitely going to hear me say if you're having difficulties specific to your breastfeeding journey, with latch or anything specific to that, you're going to hear me say it so many times. Reach out to a lactation consultant, talk to your doctor. Again, the information that I'm providing for you guys today is based on my personal experience as a mom who breastfed, and also research that I've done because I love the idea of this topic, and unfortunately, I don't think that we talk enough about the expectations socially that we have and the realities of the breastfeeding experience. So thank you all for joining me today. I think this picture on this beginning slide is so funny, but so true. I think the expectation that we all have when we're expecting, especially our very first baby, and when we have the idea that we want to breastfeed, is that the journey is going to be this beautiful moment of bonding with baby. And although that is part of it sometimes, I think that the picture on the right is more accurate of most of the times what that experience sometimes looks like, which is baby squirming everywhere and looking really exhausted and hair all over the place. And so I think really my goal for this webinar is to talk about some of those expectations that we place on ourselves or that socially sometimes get placed on us, and talk about the realities of what the breastfeeding journey really looks like. Because I know for myself when I started, I had so many questions and so many things I wish people would have told me. Now, before really moving into those things, I wanted to share this picture. I think what a beautiful picture of all of these babies getting fed. And I know over time there's been this, breast is best sort of movement. But I think it's important to remember that as long as we have a fed baby, a healthy baby, a happy baby, that is really all that matters. And the reason I wanted to point this out is sometimes it's easy for us as moms to beat ourselves up because the journey didn't go as we expected, or maybe we weren't able to breastfeed, and that was sort of what we had in mind, or that was the expectation that we had of ourselves. And it's easy to feel bad about ourselves or shame ourselves as parents, feeling like we're not doing the best. But as long as you have a baby who is fed, who is happy, who has their needs met, I think that overall is the end goal for us as parents. And so I thought, what a beautiful picture to really portray that. All of these babies are getting what they need, and they're happy, and moms are able to provide it one way or another. So I think that is just a gentle reminder to be kind to yourself, that, even if the journey doesn't go the way that you expected it, your baby is still going to be happy and healthy so long as we do whatever we can to make sure that those things get done. So in preparation for this webinar, I actually went on my Instagram and Facebook account, and I asked all the moms out there who, of course, were following me, what are some of the things that you either heard a lot of, or myths that you heard, or things that nobody told you that you wish you would have known when you started your breastfeeding journey? And here are the most common things I saw, and I thought to myself, I'm pretty sure I heard all of these during my breastfeeding journey too. And I wanted to touch on some of these. Some of the things that some moms posted out there was, it shouldn't hurt, right? That was one common thing that they were told. It shouldn't hurt. It should come naturally. And I'm definitely going to talk about that piece, that natural piece. Baby will know what to do. Frequent breastfeeding and holding them too much will spoil them. You should be enjoying this experience, right? That's the expectation. We should be enjoying it, that bonding moment. Isn't he a little too big to still be breastfeeding? This one always cracks me up because breastfeeding is so much work, and it is really practice. And finally, when we get it down and it's not so difficult anymore, babies are getting older, then there's that social expectation that, well, shouldn't you be weaning them? So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. And if it doesn't work out, sometimes we have people say, just give up. Formula is the same thing, right? And my all-time favorite one, please cover up. And so I wanted to touch on all of these points because I think these are the most common misconceptions and myths we hear. I know there are plenty more, but for the sake of time, these will be some of the ones that I'm going to be covering. And I'm so grateful that the moms out there were able to share, some of those things that they felt they either wish they would have known or misconceptions that they heard a lot that didn't necessarily fit with their breastfeeding journey. So the very first thing that I wanted to cover is this idea that breastfeeding shouldn't hurt. I wish somebody would have told me that it was going to hurt a little at the beginning. So a couple of things to keep in mind. First of all, breastfeeding will cause some tenderness. And although a well-latched baby shouldn't cause so much pain, I think there are a couple of things that we have to keep in mind. First of all, everyone has a different pain tolerance, and that's obviously going to contribute to your experience in the breastfeeding journey. What I may feel as pain, you may only interpret as maybe a bit of discomfort, right? And so I think that that is something to really take into consideration is everybody's pain tolerance is different, and that's going to affect how you're experiencing that journey with your baby. Also, I think that you have to keep in mind that your body is going through some crazy changes. I mean, just the labor and delivery portion of having a baby, your body is doing something, completely amazing, but also draining, right? And your body is trying to recover. And at the same time, your body's already working on trying to create this nutrient, this food that is supposed to help feed a baby. And so your body's going through all of these changes. So feeling that tenderness and discomfort and some pain even is actually pretty normal the first few weeks. Also, the reason that your body's going to feel pain or that you're going to feel pain during that time could be for very different reasons. Sometimes it could be due to a shallow latch. And so sometimes baby's just not latching on correctly and it's causing a lot of pain. And if baby's not latching on correctly, then they're not necessarily getting all of that milk out of your breast, which means that they're feeding more often. So they're aggravating the nipple. So you see what I'm saying? A lot of those different experiences are going to contribute to the kind of pain or discomfort that you're feeling. I remember one of the things that I wish somebody would have told me about when it came to pain was mastitis. Nobody told me that mastitis was even a thing. And I remember the experience very, very, very vividly because it was the very first night that my daughter didn't feed every hour. I think we went about 4 hours and I woke up feeling like, oh my gosh, did I not hear her? Is she hungry? And of course she was sound asleep. But the moment that I went to sit up, I had this horrible pain on my left side. And I thought, oh my God, what is this? What is this horrible pain? Immediately, I called my doctor because I was really engorged, very hard, really red. And I called my doctor and I asked, what's going on? I'm also just not feeling well. I kind of feel like I'm coming down with the flu. And of course, they said, oh yeah, it's mastitis. You have a clogged milk duct. That happens sometimes. Sometimes that happens because baby prefers one side over the other. So you're not expressing milk enough on that side and it can get a little backed up. I had no idea that that was a thing. And had I known, then I would have probably done some stuff to prevent that. So I think it's important for us to remember that pain is going to come from different experiences. But the one thing that I will say, and the one thing that I heard a lot of moms comment, or I saw comment during those questions I was asking on social media was that although you are going to experience pain at the beginning, don't give up. Because it will get better, it will get easier, your body will adjust. And of course, you'll learn about all of these things, preferably though beforehand, right? So that you're prepared for that. I think that that's one of the biggest things that we have to keep in mind is that breastfeeding takes preparation, which actually leads me to my next point. The idea that breastfeeding should come naturally. I think we hear this so often. Breastfeeding should come natural. It'll be easy. Baby will know what to do. And the reality is that although it is biologically natural for our bodies to do this, right, and for baby to want to feed, it takes practice. It takes time. It takes patience because you're trying to master this brand new skill. Not only you, but baby as well. And although baby is trying their best, trying to get fed, and our bodies are also doing things to help, right? So for example, the areola gets darker so that babies that are able to see where to latch on, because our eyesight's not so great at the beginning, and darker contrasted items or colors are easier for them. So although biologically our bodies are trying to sort of help us, it should be somewhat natural biologically, it takes practice and it's not always going to be easy. And I think that was one comment that I heard, that every breastfeeding journey is sort of different. You know, some babies just latch right away and it's super easy. And then you'll have another one and it's not so easy, right? It just requires different types of practice and patience and skill. I was reading an article specifically about this idea that it should come naturally. And the author is Sabrina Joy Stevens, who wrote this article about the idea that we need to reconsider using the term natural. And I love what she said, and I actually quoted it here. The biggest reason we should reconsider using the term natural as a default defense of breastfeeding is that it misleads families and gives them false expectations of how their breastfeeding journey should or will unfold, right? So oftentimes we hear that it should be natural, it should be easy, babies should know what to do. But using that creates this idea that it will be easy, that there will be no difficulties. And the reality is that although it could be easy and that may be your breastfeeding journey experience, that's not always the case, right? It might get difficult. One of the things that I love that she said is that sometimes, because we're often socially always saying, oh, it's natural, we're sort of setting up moms for failure, because they have this idea or this expectation of what their breastfeeding journey should look like. And then it doesn't go that way. And so they end up giving up because they don't have the information or the resources or the support to really follow through with that breastfeeding journey, because it's not as natural as everybody sort of made it seem, right? The biggest thing as well is, if you are struggling with breastfeeding, right? So if you've tried everything and you're just having continuous pain even after those first few weeks, you definitely need to seek international board certified lactation consultant. Asking for help is okay during this journey. And I think that sometimes that's why it's difficult to ask for help, because we think that this should be natural and we shouldn't need help. But the reality is that most of the time we are going to need at least some support. And Sabrina actually shared in that article her journey, and she talked about talking to a breastfeeding consultant or a lactation consultant, and the enormous changes that she saw within the first 2 to 3 weeks. Because really, it helped identify the fact that baby was having a hard time latching, and so it helped her with positions, it helped with that, as well as other things. But also it helped them recognize that baby was tongue-tied, and having a baby who has a tongue tie or a lip tie can also cause issues with latch, right? And she would have never known that had she not sought out help. So it's so important to seek out that help if you're having a hard time. And although we think it should come naturally, biologically, yes, our bodies are designed to sort of do that. It doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. I can share from my experience. When I had my daughter, the very first night, I could not get her to latch. I was having such a difficult time, and I started crying like, oh my gosh, I can't feed my baby. And I remember a nurse coming in, and she just grabbed baby, she grabbed me, and she was just trying to help us out. And I thought, oh my God, thank goodness for this woman who knows what she's doing, right? And she gave me so many pointers. For example, she recommended that I use a nipple shield, which I didn't even know was a thing, right? Another thing that I was unaware of, because there were some issues with her latch, right? And then I sought out the help of a lactation consultant to wean her off of the nipple shield. But asking for help is so important, and it takes practice. You're trying to master a new skill, and so is baby. So it's okay to ask for help during that time. Think about when your child is mastering a new skill. The expectation is that they should be able to reach out to us as parents for help, right? And so it's the same thing with breastfeeding. There is this group of people who is there to help you through that journey, and it's okay to ask for that help so that you master that skill, and eventually you can actually enjoy your breastfeeding journey. All right, so another common theme here is, aren't they a little too old? And this one is always so difficult because the way I see it is, you finally get it down, right? You finally figure it out. It's no longer painful. You're finally enjoying it. And as soon as baby reaches a certain point, there's this expectation that you have to just start weaning them off, right? And so there's all of these expectations socially that, well, you only breastfeed for so long and then you're done. And really, that the length of the journey is very dependent on mommy and baby. It should be mommy and baby choice. The length of breastfeeding is mommy and baby choice. Although it's recommended that moms breastfeed at least 6 to 12 months. Really, when you decide to stop, it's completely up to you, right? And the one thing I always say is every mom should feel proud of breastfeeding accomplishments. If you were able to make it through the first 3 months and then for whatever reason you just couldn't keep going, that's okay. You did 3 months. That's amazing. And if you're able to continue to go until you have a toddler, wow, how awesome that you were able to continue that journey with your baby. There's always a lot of debate about, well, is there really any benefit to toddler or older baby breastfeeding? And really, you have to think about, well, what do we talk about when we talk about benefit? There are some immunity boosts that can be provided to baby biologically, but more than that, psychologically, there are lots of benefits to breastfeeding past infancy. It provides a special bond between mom and child, right? Sometimes it's just a way for, baby or older kiddo to just check in with mom. It's really, really important to that bonding experience. And if that's how you feel like you bond with your baby, then that's okay, right? I think that there's a social expectation that we should breastfeed, but then we should stop right away as soon as baby is 1. And for me, I actually stopped breastfeeding my daughter when she turned 12 months, not by choice. It was just really difficult to upkeep. I was back at work full time. And although I was pumping as often as I could, I just could not keep up my supply. And she was already eating regular food, so she just didn't really care for it either, right? And we found other ways to bond, and that was totally okay. But I also had a coworker during that time who was actually my supervisor. And I remember her sharing with me that her daughter stopped breastfeeding when she was about 4 years old. And it was like this mutual choice between them of, I think we're done, right? I think that we don't need to do this anymore. And that was okay for them. That was a mutual choice they made. And so I think that the beauty of being able to breastfeed our babies is that we get to choose when we're done with that journey and that experience, regardless of what socially we are sometimes being told. So another thing that often we hear when it's not working out at the beginning is, well, just give up. Formula is the same thing. You should be fine. And what I want to tell you guys is don't give up. Many times we just need the right support and information to help with the breastfeeding journey. And I'll say it again, talk to a lactation consultant if it is getting difficult. So many moms who expect the breastfeeding journey to come naturally are set up for failure, like I mentioned before, and the reality doesn't match the image they're given. And when everyone around them, equally uninformed about breastfeeding and normal newborn behavior, suggests that their baby is eating too often or that they should give up and try baby bottle, it's easy for us to get discouraged, right? So it's super, super important for us to be well informed, right? I think that oftentimes the reason why the breastfeeding journey is so difficult is because we don't have all the information. We don't have all the facts. And it's difficult to learn a new skill if you don't know everything, if you don't have the facts or all of the information necessary to master that skill. So it's super, super important to keep trying, right? Now, breast milk and formula are not the same, although don't forget, that fed is best, and formula has made a lot of changes over years to try to provide all of the benefits to baby that they need nutrition-wise. But there are just some immunological things that breast milk contains that just cannot be mimicked in formula. And so if you are able to breastfeed your child, I definitely recommend that you try. I think the biggest thing that I heard from other moms that they wish somebody would have told them or that they wanted to tell new moms is don't give up. Although it feels hard at the beginning, when you have mastered that skill, it'll be an experience that you do get to enjoy, and you will have those moments of bonding time with baby where it's blissful and you're just engaged when baby, right? Locking eyes is no longer painful, but it takes some work to get there, just like anything else. And actually, research shows that babies who are given breast milk score higher on developmental assessments, there was a study done in 2019 where they compared kiddos who were drinking formula to those who were drinking breast milk. And what they found was that the babies who were given breast milk just tended to score a little bit higher on developmental assessments. And there's just something in the breast milk that cannot be sort of mimicked in formula that helps with cognitive development as well as that nutritional development. And I think also part of that is just the bonding experience, right? You sort of need that. And I think the breastfeeding sort of helps facilitate that once it becomes a little bit easier. Not to say that you can't create that when you're bottle feeding, but naturally it just becomes a little bit easier. Now, oftentimes what we hear sometimes as well is you're going to spoil them. You're going to spoil that baby. You keep holding them and breastfeeding them. And here's the one thing that I will say, attachment research shows that babies are dependent on us for all of their needs, right? They can't necessarily go through and get those needs met without us as parents. So breastfeeding helps create a healthy bond, and research shows that children whose needs are met and cry less tend to be more independent as they get older due to having strong relationships and feeling secure, right? Oftentimes when we're breastfeeding for, past the 12-month mark or 10 months, 11 months, getting close to a year, we're often told you're going to spoil them. They're using you to self-soothe. And honestly, that's okay. I know that a lot of the times we think, well, if we pick them up right away, or we're always meeting their need, they're going to become clingy, or they're not going to know how to meet their own needs. But really, attachment research shows that babies who have that secure attachment with mom, or with any parent for that matter, are actually more independent. And the reason being is they know that if something goes wrong or if they need something, they have that secure base that's going to be there to tend to that need. And so they feel confident in themselves to explore the world and become more independent because they have that parent who is going to be there to help them if something doesn't go the way that needs to be, or if they need some help. So one thing to keep in mind is, no, you're not going to spoil your baby. And in fact, really, we can't spoil our babies. Really what we're doing is just meeting those basic needs for them to become, again, happy, healthy kiddos who have good relationships and who become independent over time. So that's one common one we've heard. And this one I want to talk about a little bit in length because I think this one sometimes often is told that we should enjoy the experience, right? You should enjoy the breastfeeding experience. It should be a time of bonding and blissful. And although it can be an enjoyable experience, it's okay to show yourself some grace if you don't always feel that way. You are not always going to feel like, oh my God, I love breastfeeding. This is amazing. If you do, kudos to you. But I remember having moments where I felt like I'm just so tired because honestly, breastfeeding takes up a lot of mental and physical and emotional energy. It can take a toll on you. It takes a toll on your physical energy, your emotional energy, your mental energy. It's really very time consuming at the beginning, right? You're doing it often. You're trying to practice this new skill. And the one thing that I remember feeling when I first started my breastfeeding journey was feeling like that was the only piece of identity I had left, right? And last time I did a webinar, I talked a little bit about postpartum depression. And I think this really ties into that experience. When I was about maybe 2 months into breastfeeding, I felt like, oh my gosh, I remember telling my partner, I feel like a cow. I feel like I'm just a milk machine. All I do is create milk, and it's basically all I have left of my identity. And partly was I was just trying to figure out this new part of my life, which was being a mom, right? And I felt like I had lost some of the other things. And one of the things that I think is so important for you to remember is it's important to engage in some sort of self-care. It's important to take care of you. If you don't take care of you, you really can't take care of anyone else. And I know that we hear that often, self-care, and it's so cliche, but self-care can come in many different forms, right? Just being able to sit in silence to drink some tea in the morning, right? Being able to read a book. It's important to reconnect with those other parts of your identity because again, it can be draining, and it emotionally takes a toll on you, and sometimes can take a toll on your relationships. So it's important to also communicate to those people around you how you're feeling, and when you're feeling really exhausted and you feel like you need a break, it's okay to give yourself a break. So I think the number one thing that lots of moms said when I was, asking these questions via social media was, be nice to yourself. It's going to be so easy to feel like you're not doing the most, or feel guilty for not wanting to continue sometimes, or feeling just so tired and not enjoying the moment. And I will say that I experienced that same thing too. And the best thing you could do is just to show yourself some grace and say, it's okay for me to feel like this. I'm not the only mom who's felt like this in the past. And I just have to look at the facts. I'm running low on sleep. Physically, this takes a lot of energy, right? I remember when I was breastfeeding, I used to wear a Fitbit and I used to track my calories. And then in the settings, it asked me either on Fitbit or on a calorie counter, like if I was breastfeeding, and it like automatically said that when you breastfed that you were exerting about 500 calories of energy, right? That is so much energy that your body is using up to create milk and to feed a baby. So of course you're going to be tired, and that's totally expected, and it's totally okay. But again, show yourself some grace. Take a moment to breathe, to relax. I remember one thing that I had to do for myself is I would pump a lot because I wanted to make sure my supply would stay up. And there were moments where I just needed to go and have a burger at In-N-Out without feeding a baby. And I was very lucky and had a support system with my mother-in-law who would watch her, and we would leave her breast milk in a bottle. And I could just go and eat a burger in peace without holding a baby on one hand and trying to even not drop food on her on the other. So it's okay to do those things for yourself, and don't feel guilty for it. You need to decompress, and you need to recharge those batteries to continue that journey. And again, as I've mentioned before, it will get easier over time, but make sure that you're communicating with those people around you, that you find a support system, and overall that you seek out help. Again, if it's becoming a really difficult journey, if you're having a lot of pain all of the time, or you're unsure if your baby's getting enough milk, if that's a fear of yours, talk to a lactation consultant. They are probably the best person to talk to really get all that information, and to help you to troubleshoot some of those things. So some tips from other moms that I wanted to share with you guys, that I thought it was so cool that they had all this information for you, was don't give up. And I've said this probably several times during the webinar, but it's so important to just keep going and keep trying. You're doing the best that you can for a baby, and you are really a superhero for doing that. I mean, your body is doing something phenomenal, right? It's not only did it create this human being and bring it to this world, but now you're also producing this food for it, right? So your body is doing something amazing, and don't give up. But also be nice to yourself if you just can't continue. That's okay. As long as your baby is fed and happy and healthy, and their needs are met, that's the most important part. Your body needs time to adjust, and that is okay. As I mentioned earlier, be patient with yourself. One mom said, drink lots of water. Yes, you can get dehydrated during breastfeeding. It's important to drink lots of water. Keep snacks and water near you during in your nursing area. And I might have a picture of, a basket that you can have if you're an expecting mommy or a new mom. Some tips and tricks on some stuff that you can have on hand that'll make it just a little bit easier. One thing that I thought was so helpful was use a pump to catch the extra milk from the other breast. So sometimes when you're breastfeeding baby on one side, you can leak on the other side. And I remember I would actually do that. I would kind of somewhat pump while I was breastfeeding my daughter on one side. And I remember my partner, her dad, always saying like, oh my gosh, that really is like liquid gold. Like you can't waste any of it, right? So make sure that you, if you are somebody who's leaking, use that pump to catch that extra milk. Somebody said breast pads are your best friend. They're your BFF. It's common for you to leak sometimes during in between feedings and throughout the day. And breast pads are sometimes reusable and sometimes they're disposable. And they're just literally these little pads around They go in your bra, and they help so that your shirt doesn't get soaked. And then nipple shields can help at the beginning. So these are just some tips from other moms who have gone through the journey, and they learned these things along the way that they wanted to share with you guys, which I thought was so cool. And then I have these resources out here for you guys. So one mom recommended the Haka silicone breast pump, and I've heard lots of reviews about this pump. Lots of moms saying that it's a great hand pump. You can pretty much take it anywhere. They do have electric pumps, but you can't always use them everywhere. You can't take them everywhere. So this hand pump is pretty amazing. It does a pretty good job at getting most of the milk out. They also I have a picture of those breast pads that I was talking about. There are some disposable ones that you can throw away. There are also these reusable ones that you can throw in the wash. And then they have these that actually, instead of just having you throw away whatever milk fell into the breast pad, that catch that excess milk so that you can save it. And again, I remember feeling like it was liquid gold, so I tried to save as much as I could, especially for when I went back to work. I wanted to have supply saved up. And then when I had my daughter, my sister-in-law also had her son. They're 2 weeks apart, and she was unable to breastfeed. And so there were so many times that I had excess milk that I would just give her, especially because he would get sick so often. So being able to just catch that extra milk and to share the love was definitely an honor for me to help feed another baby and feed my nephew. There's also a picture of a nipple shield here. So if you're a new mama or expecting mama, I really lived on this thing the first 2 months because I was just trying to figure it out. My daughter was having a really hard time latching, and I was really scared that she wasn't getting enough milk. And so that thing was the saving grace. And of course, I talked to a lactation consultant on weaning. I highly recommend that you see a lactation consultant before going out to buy one of these because they can help you navigate how to use it. There's also different sizes, and so they can also help you get the right size for your fit. And then I have some pictures in here of Kelly Mom and La Leche League. These are amazing, amazing resources. They have so much information. Although I wanted to post everything that they had on here, obviously due to time, there are so many things I didn't get a chance to go over. But if you are experiencing some issues with breastfeeding, or you just want to learn more and get more informed before you have a baby and you start that journey, I highly recommend looking at Kelly Mom and La Leche League to get information. And then I thought, what a neat thing to post on here, the breastfeeding basket essentials. You can literally just have a little tiny basket near wherever you tend to breastfeed. And some things to have in there that most moms recommend is nipple cream. Yes, they do have something called nipple cream out there for chapped nipples. Sometimes if you're having a shallow latch, or obviously breastfeeding very often, babies go through growth spurts. And so sometimes they'll breastfeed very, very often to sort of help your body create more supply for them. And sometimes just because you're often breastfeeding, or it's happening every 30, my daughter, when she would what we call cluster feed, she would do it every 30 minutes. And those were the times where I really relied on that nipple cream for help with relief, or just to avoid pain altogether. Nursing pads, water, have some snacks in there, burp cloth and a bib, some chapstick, some hair ties to get your hair out of the way. So I thought, what a neat idea to create this breastfeeding basket essential. And if you're on here and you are not expecting and not breastfeeding, but you're here to support a breastfeeding mama, I think this is such an amazing gift to make for them, to just have this little go-to basket that they can lug around wherever they are when they're breastfeeding their babies. So that's all the information that I have for you guys today. I wanted to leave enough time for questions, or for any moms who are out there who have already breastfed and want to share their experience, or anything that you feel you want other moms to know that you wish you would have known. Now is your chance to send those via chat, and I can try my best to answer questions, or at least talk about your experience too.
Wonderful. Kimberly, thank you so much for that. Your expertise and sharing your own experiences as well. No doubt a lot of helpful information for folks. We do have a little bit of time for questions. One of the first questions we got was actually about Do you have any recommendations for what a new mom or an expecting mom can do to prepare for some of those challenges before the child is born?
Yeah, absolutely. I think number one thing is definitely read, right? La Leche League, I think, is an amazing website that has so much information on just some of those things to expect. Also, get in contact with your local lactation consultant. Find one before baby comes so that you kind of have that resource in hand, and you kind of know who to call when you're having those difficulties. A lot of the times, depending on where you're having your baby, hospitals actually have them on site. And so connect with the hospital as well. Well, they have a lactation consultant on site, just in case you're having difficulties the first few nights. I know for me, I had difficulties the very first night. I felt super, super frustrated. Baby would not stop crying. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's not eating enough. Maybe she's hungry. And it was so nice to have a lactation consultant and a nurse come in and say, let us help you. We are extra hands that you actually need at the beginning, and getting their tips and tricks. And then they also referred me to a lactation consultant in my area. But I think my biggest recommendation is find someone close to you that you can call. Definitely read on all of those things nobody talks about, like mastitis, inverted nipples. I know all of these things sound so funny, but trust me, when you start the journey, you'll be very familiar with them. So definitely read, and find somebody near you to help.
Excellent. Thank you. Another question that was asked related to in the beginning, when there are some struggles with effectively nursing my child, can you mix formula with breast milk?
Yeah, oftentimes you can. You can mix formula. I wouldn't mix the formula with the breast milk. You can certainly, feed both formula and breast milk.
I think that was what they meant.
Yeah. Although oftentimes, though, I think the recommendation is to just keep trying. So I think the biggest fear we have as moms is my baby eating enough, right? Because unlike the bottle, you can't necessarily measure what they're drinking. And so I think the biggest thing to do is follow baby's cues, right? So some things to look for is hearing that they're sucking, right? And hearing that they're actually swallowing. That is definitely a good sign that they're getting that milk in there. Also, just read baby body language, right? So typically when babies are getting full, their hands start to relax, right? If they're very hungry, tired, you'll see their clenched little fists like, I'm hungry, give me the milk now. And so their hands will start relaxing and their bodies start to relax, like, okay, I'm getting full and I'm happy. If your baby is falling asleep on the breast, they're probably done. So I think it's important to follow those cues. And also, breastfeeding is supply and demand. So the more that you have baby really on, the more your body will produce, right? So if that's the concern, I think definitely just keep trying. And if for whatever reason your body's just not producing enough, or really your baby's not eating enough, which you can tell by them continuously being cranky or not enough wet diapers, then one, definitely talk to the pediatrician. And two, connect with lactation consultant on, did you try everything you could? And then if not, then formula is okay. Like I mentioned at the beginning, fed is best. Make sure baby is fed, happy, and healthy.
Thank you. Someone else asked, I understand that breastfeeding is great for the baby. Is there research that suggests benefits for me as a mother?
Yeah, there's actually lots of research out there. And I'm so glad that somebody asked that question. So breastfeeding actually is very related to lesser or decreased chances of ovarian cancer, breast cancer, and diabetes, which I think, oh my gosh, how cool, right? Also, again, as I mentioned, after you have baby, your body's trying to just go back to its shape, right? Your cervix, your uterus, everything is trying to sort of go back to where it needs to be. And oftentimes breastfeeding helps that process. So one of the pains I forgot to talk about was having abdominal cramps sometimes at the beginning when you're breastfeeding. I remember the very first time I experienced it, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm buckling over, this is hurting. And the doctor said, that's actually very normal. That means that during breastfeeding time, your body's actually using those hormones that are being produced when you're breastfeeding to help body sort of get back into place. So there are plenty of benefits out there for you as a mom to breastfeed as well.
There was a related question, so I'm going to just kind of join it to that last one. Another person asked, does breastfeeding help with postpartum?
Yes, breastfeeding does help with postpartum. And I did mention a little tidbit on postpartum depression when I talked about, just not being an enjoyable thing. one, when you're breastfeeding, body is producing these hormones like oxytocin to help with that bond, right? And so those are, those happy hormones that make you feel good and sort of create that bonding experience. So breastfeeding, actually, there are some links that show a decrease in postpartum. However, if you are really having a severe case of postpartum depression, or you feel like postpartum depression is making it difficult for you to breastfeed, I think the number one thing is, one, make sure baby is getting fed one way or the other, and two, take care of your mental health. I definitely am a huge advocate for making sure that your mental health as a mom is a priority, as well as making sure baby is fed. Because if mentally you are not there, or you're feeling that depression, because postpartum depression is very difficult for a lot of women, you're not going to be able to create that bond with baby. And so if that's something that you're experiencing, seek out help. There is a lot of help out there. I know that it's a very taboo thing to talk about, or we don't talk about it often, postpartum depression, but it is a serious condition, and you definitely need to reach out for help. But there is research that shows that it decreases your chances of having postpartum, or it helps at least with that process.
Do you have any tips for breastfeeding in public, and when just sort of experiencing negative comments or negative people?
Yeah, that's definitely a hard one. I think my biggest comment is just ignore people. Honestly, you're probably never going to see those people again anyway. I remember the very first time I was what I would call mommy shamed. I went to Target for the very first time. My daughter was about 1 month old, so newborn baby. And of course, she was feeding about every hour, because my daughter fed every hour on the hour, like clockwork. And so we were at Target. Target has like a Starbucks area, and I sat down and I started breastfeeding her. And of course, I tried to be as polite and conscious of others as possible. I had a cover on to get her on. And then as soon as I got her on, I kind of moved it a little bit to help her breathe, because it gets hot in there. And I had somebody kind of pass by and say, "Oh my gosh." And then I heard them making comments about going to my car or going to the restroom. And I felt so shamed. And there was an older woman with her husband who overheard, and they walked by and they said, "What a beautiful thing you're doing. Who cares what other people say? Keep doing it, Mama. You've got this." And I felt that reassurance of, I am doing what's best for my baby. And, if they are uncomfortable with it, I'm sorry, I'm trying my best to be conscious of you socially, but I'm also going to make sure my baby is fed, right? So I think if you come across those situations, ignore them. I think the biggest thing I always tell people is kill people with kindness, right? Give them a smile. Usually they'll kind of get freaked out by that. And just keep doing your thing, right? Because at the end of the day, making sure the baby is fed, I think, is most important.
I appreciate that. I think that's a great approach. It's a great approach. Okay, we have one last question, and that is, do you have any advice for fathers or partners of new moms, to be able to show support during, as you've outlined, what can be challenging at times?
Yeah, definitely be patient with your wife or your partner. They are going through a lot of hormonal changes too, so they're going to be frustrated. And when we talk about that partner relationship, I also sometimes we're sort of meanest to the people that we love the most, because there's that unconditional love, right? And so that might happen sometimes. Mom is going to be tired and frustrated, but be patient, be supportive. I will say this, I was really lucky during my breastfeeding journey. My partner, my husband, was so supportive. I remember there was a moment where I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. This is so painful. And he just looked at me and he was like, "You got this. Like, you are so strong. You birthed this baby, and this is what you wanted to do. So you can do it, don't give up." And it was really what I needed. And just be helpful with other things. I know for him, a really big thing was making sure that he had that skin to skin time with baby. So the first month he was home, I basically just fed baby, and then he took care of the rest, because he wanted to give my body time to heal, give me time to rest. Also, we had a little bit of a deal where if I breastfed, he changed diapers. So I didn't change any diapers the first 3 months, which is kind of nice. So I just think, one, be communicative. I think you know your partner pretty well too, and when she's going through something, and just connect with her. If she's not communicating those difficulties with you, connect with her and say, "Hey, is everything okay? Is this becoming a struggle? What do we need to do to get you the support that you need if this is really something that you want to continue to do? And then if mom really just can't keep with her journey, be supportive as well and say, well, as long as our baby is fed, that's all that matters.
Well, that was really great. That's all of our questions. I want to really share my thanks to you, Kimberly, for bringing your expertise and experiences on this important topic.
Thank you for participating in this webinar hosted by the Institute for Child Development and Family Relations at California State University, San Bernardino, providing guidance for parents and families based on science and best practice since 2002.